The rain came down in gray sheets. It washed over my windshield faster than the wipers could clear it. Each swipe was a short moment of clarity, followed by a blur of water and darkness. The road ahead was a black ribbon. My headlights cut through the night, but they didn't reach far. It was like driving into a solid wall of nothing. Up ahead, a figure stood on the shoulder of the highway. It was just a shape at first, a dark smudge against the stormy background. My foot eased off the accelerator. Company rules were clear. No riders, ever. But the rules were made in a warm office with bright lights. Out here, on this empty stretch of I-80 in Wyoming, the rules felt distant. The road was a lonely place. The endless hum of the engine and the hiss of the tires could make a man feel like the last person on earth. He didn't stick out a thumb. He just stood there, watching my headlights grow bigger. He wore a dark coat, soaked through. As I got closer, I saw he was just a man. Not young, not old. He looked tired, the kind of tired that sinks into your bones. I pulled the big rig onto the gravel shoulder. The brakes sighed, and the whole truck shuddered to a stop. I leaned over and pushed the passenger door open. It groaned in protest. "Get in," I yelled over the storm. "You'll catch your death out there." He climbed up the steps without a word. He moved with a strange stillness, not clumsy like most people trying to get into a semi. He settled into the passenger seat and pulled the heavy door shut. The roar of the storm was suddenly muffled. The cab felt small and quiet. All I could hear was the engine's low rumble and the tapping of rain on the roof. He dripped water onto the rubber floor mat. "Thanks," he said. His voice was calm and even. It didn't fit the wild night outside. "Don't mention it," I said, pulling back onto the highway. The truck groaned as it picked up speed. "Where you headed?" "East," he said. That was all. East is a big place. I glanced at him. His face was thin. His eyes were dark and seemed to catch the light from the dashboard in a strange way. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the road ahead, as if he knew every curve. "It'll do," he said. We drove in silence for a few miles. The only sounds were the truck and the storm. I was starting to regret my decision. The loneliness was bad, but this quiet felt worse. It felt heavy. I tried to make small talk. "Name's Leo," I offered. He turned his head slowly and looked at me. A small smile touched his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I know," he said. I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. My knuckles were white. "How could you know that?" "You have it on your hat," he said, pointing. I looked up. My favorite old baseball cap was on the dashboard. Stitched on the back were the words "Leo's Hauling." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Of course, simple. I felt stupid. "Right," I said, trying to laugh it off. "Forgot about that." He didn't laugh. He just kept watching me. "You shouldn't let your guard down so easy, Leo." My hands felt slick on the wheel. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you picked me up, against the rules. Your dispatcher, Sarah, would be angry if she knew." The cab suddenly felt very cold. I had never told him where I worked. I had never mentioned Sarah. My heart started to beat a fast, heavy rhythm against my ribs. It felt like a drum. "Who are you?" I asked. My voice was tight. "Just a passenger," he said, turning to look out the window again. The passing lights of another truck painted stripes across his face. "You get nervous when you're cornered. You start tapping your fingers, 3 times, on the steering wheel." I looked down. My fingers were tapping against the worn leather of the wheel. 1, 2, 3. a nervous habit I'd had since I was a kid, a habit nobody knew about. Not my ex-wife, not my own brother, nobody. I swallowed hard. My throat was dry. "How are you doing this?" "I just watch," he said softly. "I pay attention." Most people don't. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small worn photograph. It was old and faded. He held it out for me. My eyes flicked from the road to the picture. It took me a second to understand what I was seeing. It was a dog, a clumsy-looking golden retriever puppy chewing on a red ball. "That's Buster," I whispered. My voice was hoarse. It was my dog from when I was 8 years old. He'd been hit by a car. I hadn't thought about him in 20 years. I had no pictures of him. They were all lost in a fire at my parents' house a long time ago. "How did you get that?" I demanded. My voice was louder now. Panic was starting to bubble up in my chest. The man smiled again, that same empty smile. "You love that dog more than anything. You cried for a week when he was gone. You told your dad you'd never forget him. He was reciting my life back to me, words I had spoken as a child, words no one else could have heard." "Who sent you?" I asked, my mind racing. Was this a prank? Some kind of elaborate, cruel joke? "Is this about the money? The insurance from the accident?" The man slowly shook his head. He tucked the photograph back into his pocket. "This isn't about money, Leo. Money is simple. This is about the choices you make, the things you see and the things you ignore." The road stretched on. The rain kept falling. The dashboard clock glowed green. 2:17 a.m. We were in the middle of nowhere. Just me and this man who knew my secrets. He knew the name of my dispatcher. He knew my nervous habits. He had a picture of my dead dog. I thought about pulling over. I could throw him out, leave him on the side of the road where I found him. But I was afraid. A deep, cold fear I had never felt before. What else did he know? What was he capable of? "You look pale," he said, his voice calm, "like you did after you saw the first one." "The first? What?" I asked, my knuckles aching from gripping the wheel. He didn't answer right away. He just watched the wipers pushing the water back and forth, back and forth. "The first sign," he finally said, "on the road. The one you told yourself was just a trick of the light. The one you tried so hard to forget." My blood ran cold. I knew exactly what he was talking about. A memory I had buried deep. A memory from a long, lonely drive just like this one years ago. Something I saw on the side of the road. Something that couldn't have been real. "You should have stopped then, Leo," the man said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You should have turned around." The memory came back like a punch to the gut. It wasn't something I thought about. It was something I had locked in a box and buried deep in the back of my mind. 5 years ago, a different truck, a different company, but the same kind of road. A long, empty highway in the middle of the Nevada desert. The sun was setting, painting the sky in colors of fire and blood. I was tired. My eyes burned from staring at the endless gray asphalt. And then I saw it. On the right side of the road, a telephone pole stood alone against the sky. But it wasn't right. Instead of wires, heavy, rusted chains were draped over the crossbar, and from the chains something was hanging, a dark shape twisting slowly in the wind. It looked almost human. My heart hammered in my chest. I stared for a few seconds, my mind refusing to understand what my eyes were seeing. Then I looked in my rearview mirror. It was just a normal telephone pole. Wooden, solid, with thin black wires stretching off into the distance. There were no chains. There was no dark, twisting shape. I told myself I was seeing things. Road fatigue, they call it. The mind plays tricks on you out here. I shook my head, turned the radio up louder, and drove on. I didn't look back. I forced it out of my mind. Now, sitting here in the rain-soaked cab, the memory was as clear as the day it happened. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said. The lie felt thin and weak in the small space. My voice was trembling. The man didn't even look at me. He just watched the road. "You do," he said, his voice a low hum. It was a Kenworth T680, red. "You were listening to that old Johnny Cash song, God's Gonna Cut You Down." The air conditioner was broken, and the air smelled like dust and hot plastic. You saw the pole with the chains, you saw the shape hanging from them, and you chose to look away. Every detail was perfect. He knew the make of the truck, he knew the song on the radio, things I hadn't even remembered until he said them. The fear in my chest turned into something sharp and cold. It was ice spreading through my veins. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Is this blackmail? You want money?" "I told you, this isn't about money," he said. He finally turned to look at me, and his dark eyes seemed to see right through me. "This is about the road, Leo. The real road, the one you drive on every night but never truly see. It has rules." He reached into his coat again. This time he pulled out a small black notebook. It was bound in cracked leather and had no markings on the cover. It looked ancient. He opened it carefully, the pages thin and yellowed. "You broke a rule tonight," he said, his finger tracing a line of text on the page. "A big one." "What are you talking about?" "I broke a company rule, that's it." "Not a company rule," he said, shaking his head slowly. "A rule of the road. There are many. Most drivers live their whole lives without ever knowing them. They're lucky. They don't see the signs. But you do, Leo. You've seen them, and that means the rules apply to you." He cleared his throat and read from the book. His voice was flat, like a teacher reading from a textbook. "Rule number 7. Never offer a ride to the waiting. That's me, Leo. I was the one waiting. I was just trying to help," I stammered. "It's pouring rain out there." "Your intentions don't matter," he said, closing the book with a soft snap. "The road doesn't care about intentions. It only cares about the rules. An action is taken. A rule is broken. A price must be paid." The word price hung in the air between us. It felt heavy, dangerous. I tightened my grip on the wheel. My mind was scrambling, looking for a way out. I could pull over at the next truck stop. It was only 50 miles away. I could run. I could call the police. But what would I tell them? That a man had a picture of my dog? That he knew what song was on my radio 5 years ago? They would think I was crazy. "You think about running," the passenger said as if reading my thoughts. "You think about calling for help. But who would believe you? They'd look at you, Leo. They'd see the exhaustion in your eyes. They'd remember the accident last year, the one where you fell asleep at the wheel. They'd say you were unstable. He knew about the accident. The official report said I'd been cut off. It was a lie I told to save my job. The truth was, I had closed my eyes for just a second. A micro-sleep. I woke up to the screech of metal and the smell of burning rubber. No one was hurt, but my rig was totaled. It was a secret I had guarded carefully. A shame that followed me on every long haul. "You carry that shame with you," he whispered, "just like you carry the guilt about your father. You were in California when he was in the hospital. You told yourself the load was too important. You told yourself you'd see him next week. but there was no next week. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and sharp. He was taking my life apart, piece by painful piece. He was showing me all the dark corners I never looked in. "Why are you doing this?" I choked out. "Because you need to understand," he said. "You need to see the whole board. All the pieces. You've been playing a game without knowing the rules. That ends tonight." He leaned forward slightly, his calm expression changing for the first time. There was a new intensity in his eyes, a kind of focus. "The signs are markers," he said. "They show you where the real road bleeds through into this one. The pole was the first one you noticed, but there were others, things you dismissed. The deer on the side of the road with too many eyes, the radio broadcast that spoke your name, the shadow that kept pace with your truck for a mile." He was listing things I had experienced, small, strange events on lonely nights, things I had explained away as tricks of the mind, dreams, glitches in the radio signal, but hearing him list them out loud, one after another, gave them a terrible weight. They weren't random. They were a pattern. "You are a person who sees things, Leo," he said. "Some people are just born that way. You're a magnet for the strange. And now, you've broken a rule. That gets you noticed." He fell silent. He turned his attention back to the road ahead. The rain was letting up a little. The wipers moved with a slower, more deliberate rhythm. The world outside was still a black void, but the sheets of water were thinner now. I wanted to say something. I wanted to scream, but my throat was closed up tight. My hands were locked onto the wheel. I was a prisoner in my own truck. "There," the man said suddenly. His voice was sharp. He pointed a long, thin finger at the windshield. "Just ahead, past the bend." I squinted, trying to see through the night. My headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the wet road. There was something up ahead, a flickering light. It was on the shoulder of the road. "What is it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "The second sign," he replied. His voice was grim. "The one they put out when a rule has been broken. The one that marks the collection point." He turned to me, his face a pale mask in the dashboard lights. "This time, Leo, you can't just drive by. The rules say you have to stop." My foot hovered over the brake. Every instinct screamed at me to slam my foot on the accelerator instead, to fly past whatever was waiting for us in the dark. But the man's words echoed in my head. "You have to stop." I didn't know why, but I believed him. It felt like a law of nature, like gravity. I slowed the truck down. The engine's roar softened to a low grumble. The flickering light grew brighter as we approached. It wasn't a flare, it was an old-fashioned lantern. It sat on a small wooden crate on the side of the road. Its flame danced in the wind, casting long, spooky shadows across the asphalt. "Pull over here," the passenger said. His voice was steady. Mine would not have been. I guided the rig onto the wide gravel shoulder and brought it to a stop. The air brakes hissed, a loud, final sound in the quiet night. I turned off the engine. The sudden silence was deafening. The only sound was the faint ticking of the cooling engine and the soft patter of the last few raindrops on the roof. The lantern light glowed with a warm orange color. It looked out of place on the side of a modern highway. Beside the crate and lantern, there was a single wooden chair. It was a simple, straight-backed dining chair. It looked like it belonged in someone's grandmother's kitchen, not out here in the middle of a Wyoming storm. "What now?" I asked. My voice was a dry rasp. "Now, you listen," he said. He reached into his coat and pulled out the small black notebook again. He opened it to a specific page. There are more rules for this part. You need to follow them exactly. Do you understand, Leo? Exactly. I nodded, unable to speak. My eyes were fixed on the strange scene outside. The lantern, the crate, the empty chair. It felt like a stage set for a play I didn't want to be in. Rule number 12, he read. When the lantern is lit, the driver must approach the chair alone. That's you, Leo. I have to stay here. My heart jumped into my throat. Alone? You want me to go out there alone? It's the rule, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Rule number 13. The driver must not speak unless spoken to. This is very important. Do not say a word. Don't ask questions. Don't even say hello. Just sit and wait. He paused, letting the words sink in. My mind was reeling. This was insane. I was a truck driver, not a character in some ghost story. But the man beside me, with his impossible knowledge of my life, made it all feel terrifyingly real. And the last one for now, he continued. Rule number 14. Do not accept anything that is offered to you. They might offer you something, a drink, food, a map. Don't take it. No matter what, do not take it. He looked at me, his dark eyes searching my face. Can you do that, Leo? Can you follow those 3 rules? I swallowed the lump of fear in my throat. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't take anything. Go alone. Good, he said, closing the book. Go on now. They don't like to be kept waiting. My hand was shaking as I reached for the door handle. It felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I pushed the door open, and the cold, damp air rushed into the cab. It smelled of wet earth and pine trees. The sounds of the night came back, the drip of water from the trees, the distant cry of some night bird. I climbed down from the truck. My boots crunched on the wet gravel. The ground felt unsteady beneath my feet. The lantern on the crate seemed to burn brighter now that I was closer. Its light flickered on my face. I walked toward the empty chair. Each step was an effort. My legs felt like they were made of lead. The chair was old. The wood was dark and worn smooth in places. It was empty, but it didn't feel empty. It felt like it was waiting for me. I stood in front of it for a moment, my breath fogging in the cold air. Then, remembering the rule, I sat down. The wood was cold and hard against my back. I sat stiffly, my hands gripping my knees, stared straight ahead at the dark, empty road. The silence was immense. I could hear my own heart beating, a frantic, unsteady rhythm in my chest. I waited. 1 minute passed, then 2. It felt like an eternity. Nothing happened. The lantern flame danced. The wind whispered through the trees. I started to feel foolish. I was sitting on a chair on the side of a highway in the middle of the night because a strange man told me to. Maybe this was the prank, the final, stupid punchline. Then I heard a sound. It was a soft, shuffling noise. It came from the darkness on the other side of the road. I wanted to turn my head. I wanted to look, but I was frozen in place. The man's words came back to me. Do not speak unless spoken to. Did that also mean not to look? I didn't know. I kept my eyes fixed on the road ahead. The shuffling got closer. It was the sound of something being dragged through the wet gravel. Slowly, deliberately. Then the sound stopped. I felt a presence in front of me. Someone, or something, was standing just beyond the edge of the lantern's light. I couldn't see them clearly. I could only see a tall, dark silhouette against the deeper blackness of the night. I held my breath. My whole body was tense. My muscles ached. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, watching me. The silence stretched on, thin and tight like a wire. Then a voice spoke. It was a low, raspy voice. It sounded like dry leaves skittering across pavement. "Leo," the voice said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. My heart pounded. This was it, the moment of the test. Do not speak unless spoken to. I had been spoken to. What did I do now? My mind was blank with panic. "You have broken a rule," the voice rasped. "You have interfered with the natural course of things. A price must be paid." The figure took a step forward into the edge of the light. I could see more now. It was a man, I think. He wore old, dark clothes, like a farmer from 100 years ago. His face was in shadow, but I could see his hands. They were long and thin, with dirt under the nails. In one hand, he held a small, leather pouch. "The road demands balance," the voice continued. "A debt has been created. It must be settled." He held out the leather pouch. "Take this. It will cover your debt. A small thing, a token. It will make things right again." My eyes were glued to the pouch. It was old and stained. It looked heavy. I remembered the passenger's warning, sharp and clear. "Do not accept anything that is offered to you." My mouth was dry. I needed to say something. I needed to refuse. But my voice wouldn't work. The fear had stolen it. I just stared at the pouch, my mind screaming. The figure took another step closer. He was almost in the full light of the lantern now. I could smell him. He smelled of damp soil and something else, something sweet and rotten, like old flowers. "Take it, Leo," the voice hissed. There was an urgency in it now, a command. "Settle your account." He pushed the pouch toward me, his long fingers just inches from my own. I could feel a strange pull, a desire to just take it, to end this terrible confrontation, to make it all go away. My hand started to lift from my knee, my fingers twitching. But then I saw his face. For just a second, the lantern flame flickered high, and I saw his eyes. They were completely black, not dark brown or deep blue. They were solid black, like two holes burned into his face. There was nothing human in them. That sight broke the spell. The fear was still there, but a new feeling surged through me. Revulsion. I snatched my hand back and pressed it against my chest. I shook my head, a small, jerky motion. "No," I whispered. The word came out weak and thin, but it was there. "No." The figure stood perfectly still. The hand holding the pouch remained outstretched. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, he pulled his hand back. The raspy voice spoke again, but this time it was different. It was colder, sharper. "A debt that is not paid is a debt that grows," he said. He tucked the pouch away into his dark clothes. "You have made your choice, Leo. The road will remember." Then he turned and shuffled back into the darkness. The sound of his footsteps on the gravel faded away until there was only silence again. I was alone, sitting in the chair, my heart beating like a trapped bird against my ribs. I don't know how long I sat there. It could have been minutes. It could have been an hour. Time had lost its meaning. My body was locked in place, my mind replaying the encounter over and over. The shuffling footsteps, the raspy voice, those empty, black eyes, the coldness of his final words, "The road will remember," had seeped into my bones. Finally, a new sound cut through the night, the heavy groan of my truck's passenger door opening. I flinched, startled, and looked over my shoulder. My passenger was climbing down from the cab. He walked over to me, his steps sure and steady on the gravel. He looked at the empty road, then at me. "You can get up now," he said. His voice was calm, but there was a new note of something in it. Respect, maybe? It's over. For now, my limbs felt stiff and uncooperative. I pushed myself up from the wooden chair, my legs trembling. I felt drained, as if all the strength had been sucked out of me. I looked at the lantern and the crate. They were still there, a bizarre piece of scenery in the middle of nowhere. What was that? I asked, my voice hoarse. Who was that? He's a collector, the man said simply. He walked over to the lantern and with a quick puff of breath blew out the flame. The world was plunged back into darkness, lit only by the faint glow of my truck's running lights. They maintain the balance. When a rule is broken, they are sent to settle the account. He picked up the small lantern and the crate, carrying them as if they weighed nothing. He walked to the edge of the woods and placed them gently behind a large pine tree, hiding them from view. What was in the pouch? I asked, my voice still a whisper. He turned back to me. A shortcut, he said, a way to pay the debt quickly. But the cost is always more than you think. You did the right thing by refusing it. The most important thing. He looked at me, a serious expression on his thin face. Rule number 15. Never accept a gift from the road servants. It's not a gift. It's a chain. We walked back to the truck in silence. Climbing back into the cab felt like returning to a safe harbor after a storm. The familiar smell of coffee and diesel was comforting. I slumped into the driver's seat, my hands shaking. So, what happens now? I asked as he settled into his own seat. I didn't pay the debt. No, you didn't, he said. That means your account is still open, and it will gather interest. He looked out the front windshield. Driving by the signs was one thing. Picking me up was another. But refusing a collector? That changes your status, Leo. You're no longer just someone who sees things. You're now an active player. You've made a move on the board. I started the engine. The powerful diesel rumbled to life, a familiar, reassuring sound. I pulled the rig back onto the highway, my eyes scanning the darkness nervously. The road didn't look the same anymore. It felt different. Alive, and it felt like it was watching me. So, I'm in danger, I said. It wasn't a question. You have always been in danger, he corrected me gently, from the moment you saw the first sign and didn't turn back. But yes, the danger is more direct now. The road will test you. It will try to collect what it is owed. How? What is it going to do? My mind imagined all sorts of terrible things. Another accident, a breakdown in the middle of nowhere. The road is subtle, he said. It works through the cracks in the world. It uses illusions. It preys on your fears and your regrets. It will show you things that aren't there. A flicker of movement in your mirror, a familiar face in a crowd at a truck stop, a voice on the radio that whispers your secrets. A chill went down my spine. The deer with too many eyes. The radio broadcast that spoke my name. It had already been happening. I just hadn't understood. It will try to make you make a mistake, he continued. Get you to break another rule. A smaller one, maybe. But each broken rule adds to the debt. It will wear you down, Leo, until you're too tired to refuse the next collector who comes along. I drove on, the miles slipping by under my wheels. My passenger was silent for a long time. I was grateful for it. I needed to think. My entire world had been turned upside down in the space of a few hours. The simple job of driving a truck from point A to point B was now a terrifying journey through a hidden world, governed by strange rules and inhabited by faceless collectors. Who are you? I finally asked, the question that had been burning in my mind since he first got in the truck. "How do you know all this? Are you one of them?" He shook his head. "No, I'm not a collector. Think of me as an observer, or maybe an auditor. I watch the accounts. I make sure the rules are followed, by both sides." "So, you're like a referee?" A small, sad smile touched his lips. "Something like that. Sometimes when a new player like you enters the game so dramatically, I'm sent to explain the rules, to give them a fair chance. The road is powerful, but it must be fair." "A fair chance," I said, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "This doesn't feel fair." "Fairness is a matter of perspective," he said. "You have a choice. You always have a choice. You can follow the rules, you can keep your eyes open, you can resist, or you can give in. Most people give in eventually." We were approaching the lights of a city, Cheyenne, the first sign of civilization I had seen in hours. The orange glow on the horizon was a welcome sight. It meant people. It meant light. It meant safety. Or so I hoped. "I'm dropping you off here," I said, my voice firm. "I've had enough of this. I'm going to pull into the first truck stop, and you're getting out." The passenger didn't protest. He simply nodded. "As you wish. My purpose is almost served." I took the next exit, my tires humming on the off-ramp. Ahead, the giant, brightly lit sign of a major truck stop chain rose into the sky. It was a familiar, comforting sight. I pulled the rig into the vast parking lot, finding a spot at the far end, away from the other trucks. I brought the truck to a stop and turned to him. "This is it. Get out." He looked at me, his dark eyes unreadable in the dim light of the cab. "Before I go, I have one last thing for you, Leo. Not a gift, a warning, and another rule." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a serious whisper. "Your debt is now tied to this truck. Your truck. This is your piece on the board. The road will focus on it. It will try to take it from you, because if it takes your truck, it takes you." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "Which brings us to rule number 23, he said, his eyes boring into mine. "Never leave your rig unattended between midnight and sunrise. Not for a minute, not for a second. That is when the veil is thinnest. That is when they can cross over most easily. If you have to get fuel, if you have to go inside, you wait until the sun is up. Do you understand?" I nodded, my throat tight. "Good," he said. He reached for the door handle. "Be careful, Leo." The game has just begun. He opened the door and climbed out. I watched him walk away across the brightly lit parking lot. He didn't look back. He just walked toward the main building, a dark, solitary figure. He reached the entrance, pulled the glass door open, and disappeared inside. I sat there for a long time, the engine idling. My mind was a whirlwind of fear and confusion. Rules, collectors, debts. It was too much. I needed to clear my head. I looked at the clock on the dashboard. 4:32 a.m. The sun wouldn't be up for another hour and a half, but I was thirsty. My throat was like sandpaper, and the coffee in my thermos was cold. The truck stop building looked warm and inviting, full of light and people, safe. Surely I could just run in for a coffee. 5 minutes. What could happen in 5 minutes? The man was gone. Maybe he was just a crazy hitchhiker, a master manipulator who had messed with my head. Rule number 23. Never leave your rig unattended. It was just a story, I told myself, a crazy story from a crazy man. I turned off the engine, grabbed my keys, and pushed the door open. The night air was cold. I took one last look at my truck, standing silent under the parking lot lights, and started walking toward the building. The truck stop was an island of light and noise in the vast, dark ocean of the night. The automatic doors hissed open, and I stepped into a wave of warm, greasy air. It smelled of stale coffee, sizzling bacon, and disinfectant. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, buzzing with a nervous energy that matched my own. I scanned the diner area, looking for the passenger. He was nowhere to be seen. A few other drivers were scattered among the booths, hunched over plates of food or staring blankly into mugs of coffee. Their faces were etched with the familiar lines of road weariness. They were men like me, living their lives on the asphalt, but they seemed to be in a different world, a normal world. I walked to the counter and ordered a large black coffee. The woman behind the register had tired eyes and a forced smile. She filled a paper cup and slid it across the counter. Her movements were automatic, rehearsed. She'd probably served 1,000 drivers just like me tonight. "Anything else?" she asked, her voice flat. "No, that's it," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. I paid for the coffee and turned away from the counter. My plan was to get back to my truck immediately. But a strange feeling held me in place, a powerful reluctance to go back out into the cold and the dark. The warmth of the diner felt like a shield. The passengers' warnings seemed distant and dreamlike in here, under the bright, humming lights. Just 5 more minutes, I told myself. Let the coffee cool down a little. I found an empty booth in the corner, one that gave me a clear view of the parking lot through the large plate glass window. I could see my rig from here, a big, dark shape under the orange glow of the security lamps. It looked fine. It was just a truck, a machine of steel and rubber. I took a sip of the hot coffee. It burned my tongue, but the bitterness was grounding. I watched the other drivers. One was talking on his phone, laughing loudly. Another was meticulously cleaning his glasses with a napkin. A third was asleep in his booth, his head resting on his folded arms. It was all so normal, so mundane. The passenger had to be a liar. A very convincing one, but a liar nonetheless. How could he know all those things about me? Maybe he'd been following me. Maybe he was a private investigator hired by the insurance company for my accident. That had to be it. It was the only explanation that made any sense. Feeling a bit better, I took another sip of coffee. I glanced out the window at my truck again. Everything was still. The parking lot was mostly empty, save for a few other semis and a couple of cars. A light snow had started to fall, tiny white flakes drifting down through the cones of light from the lamps. And then I saw him. A man was standing near the front of my truck. He was just standing there, his hands in his pockets, looking at the grill. He was a silhouette against the light, so I couldn't make out his features. My heart gave a sudden, hard thump against my ribs. It's just another driver, I told myself. He's probably just admiring the truck. But he didn't move. He just stood there, perfectly still. Too still. Drivers were always in motion, checking their tires, cleaning their windshields, heading in or out. They didn't just stand and stare. I felt a cold dread creep up my spine. The warmth of the diner vanished. The passenger's voice was suddenly loud in my head. "Never leave your rig unattended between midnight and sunrise." I had been gone for maybe 10 minutes. I stood up so quickly that my chair scraped loudly against the linoleum floor. The sleeping driver in the nearby booth stirred. I didn't care. My eyes were locked on the figure outside. He still hadn't moved. It was like he was a statue. I threw a couple of dollars on the table for the coffee and strode towards the exit. My hands were balled into fists. My mind was racing. Who was he? What did he want? The automatic doors hissed open, and the cold air hit me like a slap in the face. The light snow was sticking to the ground now, a thin white dusting over the black pavement. I started walking toward my truck, my steps quick and purposeful. "Hey!" I shouted, my voice cutting through the quiet night. "What do you want?" The figure didn't respond. He didn't even turn his head. He just kept staring at the front of my truck. I was getting closer now. I could see he was wearing old, dark clothes, a farmer's clothes. My blood ran cold. It was him, the collector from the side of the road. "Get away from my truck," I yelled. My voice was tight with a mixture of fear and anger. He finally moved. He turned his head slowly, deliberately, to look at me. Even from 50 feet away, I could feel the emptiness of his gaze. I could almost see those two black holes for eyes. He didn't say a word. He just looked at me. Then he turned back to my truck and reached out a hand. He laid his palm flat against the chrome grille, right over the manufacturer's emblem. It was a simple, quiet gesture, but the moment his hand made contact, the lights in the parking lot flickered, all of them. They buzzed loudly for a second, then dimmed to a sickly, weak orange. A low humming sound started to come from my truck. It wasn't the sound of the engine. It was a deeper, stranger vibration, a sound I could feel in the soles of my feet. It grew louder, more intense, a deep, resonant groan like stressed metal. I broke into a run, my boots slipping on the thin layer of snow. "Get off of it!" I screamed. The collector didn't move his hand. The groaning from the truck grew louder. I saw the massive chrome grille begin to warp, to bend inwards under his hand as if it were made of soft clay. The metal twisted and buckled, the emblem distorted into a grotesque parody of itself. The headlights flickered and then shattered, glass tinkling onto the pavement. It was impossible. It couldn't be happening. But it was. He was unmaking my truck. He was destroying it with a single touch. I was 20 feet away when he finally pulled his hand back. The groaning stopped. The lights in the lot flickered back to their full brightness. The collector turned and looked at me one last time. A small, thin smile touched his lips. It was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. Then he just dissolved. He didn't walk away. He crumbled into a cloud of what looked like dust or dry leaves, which was then caught by the wind and scattered into the darkness. One moment he was there, and the next he was gone. I stood there, panting, my breath coming in ragged white clouds. I stared at the spot where he had been. There was nothing there, just a few swirling snowflakes. My eyes moved to my truck, my beautiful, powerful machine, my home, my livelihood. The front was ruined. The grille was caved in, a deep, hand-shaped impression pressed into the mangled chrome. The headlights were shattered voids. The whole front end seemed to sag like a weary, defeated beast. It was broken. It was violated. I walked the last few steps in a daze. I reached out a trembling hand and touched the twisted metal. It was cold and solid. The damage was real. This wasn't a dream. This wasn't an illusion. I had left it alone. I had broken the rule, and the road had come to collect. I stood there in the fallen snow, staring at the wreckage of my truck. The cheerful lights of the truck stop seemed to mock me. The world kept turning. A truck rumbled past on the highway. Inside the diner, people were drinking coffee, living their normal lives, completely unaware of the impossible thing that had just happened in this parking lot. My anger and fear had curdled into a cold, heavy lump of despair in my stomach. The passenger's words came back to me. Your debt is now tied to this truck. If it takes your truck, it takes you. It wasn't just about the damage. This was a message, a warning of what was to come. I walked around to the driver's side and pulled myself up into the cab. The inside was the same. My hat on the dashboard, the cold thermos of coffee, the familiar worn spot on the steering wheel. It was a violation, an invasion. My safe space was no longer safe. I put the key in the ignition, my hand shaking so badly it took 2 tries. I turned it. For a terrifying second, nothing happened. Then the engine coughed, sputtered, and finally roared to life. It sounded rough, wounded, but it was alive. A surge of something fierce and stubborn went through me. Despair gave way to defiance. They had hurt my truck. They had marked it. But they hadn't killed it. Not yet. I didn't know what to do. Who could I call? What could I say? Hello, Highway Patrol. A ghost just destroyed the front of my rig. They'd lock me up. My company would fire me. I was on my own. I put the truck in gear and pulled out of the parking spot. The wounded machine groaned in protest, but it moved. I drove out of the truck stop, back onto the highway, heading east into the approaching dawn. I didn't have a destination. I just had to keep moving. To stop felt like surrender. As the first gray light of morning began to creep over the horizon, painting the edges of the clouds in pale pink and orange, I saw something on my dashboard. It was a piece of paper, folded neatly, tucked under the brim of my baseball cap. It hadn't been there before. I was sure of it. With one hand on the wheel, I reached over and picked it up. My fingers trembled as I unfolded it. The paper was old, yellowed and thin, like a page from an old book. There was writing on it in a neat, spidery script. It was a list. The rules of the road, abridged for new players. My blood ran cold. It was from him, the passenger. He had left it for me. I scanned the list. 1. Do not stop for those who wait on the shoulder. 2. Do not acknowledge the signs. To see them is a burden. To interact is an invitation. 3. Never sleep in your cab on the side of a road marked with a single dead tree. 4. If the radio plays a song from your childhood that no one else should know, turn it off immediately. Do not listen to the end. 5. Never trust the reflection in your mirrors after sundown. It is not always your own. 6. If you see another truck exactly like yours, pull over and wait for it to pass. Do not race it. Do not follow it. 7. Never leave your rig unattended between midnight and sunrise. There were more, a dozen of them at least, each one stranger and more specific than the last. Never pick up a coin you find on the asphalt. If a town on a map is not there in reality, do not go looking for it. Never deliver a load to a warehouse with no address. It was a survival guide for a world I never knew existed. At the very bottom of the page, there was a final handwritten note. Leo, you have 2 paths. You can abandon the truck, leave the road, go live a small, quiet life somewhere and hope they lose your scent. The debt will remain, but it may lay dormant. Or you can keep driving, you can learn the rules, you can pay attention, you can fight back. The road is a dangerous place, but it is not all-powerful. It respects strength. It respects those who endure. The choice is yours. For now. I read the note 3 times. Abandon the truck. The thought was tempting. I could sell it for scrap, buy a bus ticket, and disappear. Find a job in a factory, an apartment in a quiet town. I could pretend none of this ever happened. But as I looked at the mangled front of my rig, I knew I couldn't. This truck was more than a machine to me. It was my life. It was all I had left. They had come for it. They had come for me. Running felt like dying. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. The sun was rising now, a brilliant, blinding ball of fire in my rearview mirror. The light flooded the cab, chasing away the last of the shadows. I didn't know who my passenger was, a guardian angel, a devil on my shoulder. It didn't matter. He had given me a choice. He had given me the rules. He had given me a chance. The road ahead stretched out, a long gray ribbon disappearing into the horizon. It was a dangerous place, full of secrets and shadows. But it was my road, my fight. The collector's smile flashed in my mind, and my fear was burned away by a cold, hard anger. "You want to fight?" I whispered to the empty road. "You got one." I folded the list of rules carefully and tucked it into my shirt pocket, right over my heart. I pressed my foot down on the accelerator. The wounded engine roared, and the truck picked up speed, hurtling east into the morning sun. The game was on, and I was going to learn how to play. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. These late-night stories are a passion of mine, and it means the world to me that you're here to listen. This community is the engine that keeps this channel running, and I'm so grateful for every single one of you. Your support goes directly into making more stories like this one. If you have a story you think I should tell, or just want to talk about the strange things you see out there on the road, leave a comment below. I read every single one. Stay safe out there, keep your eyes open, and I'll see you on the next haul.